Penetration of online hatred into everyday society is also facilitated by political activity. A prime example is Justice for Men and Boys and the Women Who Love Them, a British political party that registered with the Electoral Commission in February 2013. By its very nature, the reincarnation of this particular MRA community as an official political party has enabled the group, which formerly called itself the Anti-Feminism League and now goes by the acronym J4MB, to achieve a significant sweep of media coverage. From The Telegraph to BuzzFeed to The Observer, articles included quotes from the party's leader, Mike Buchanan, such as, "We hear a lot about misogyny, which is actually very rare, but a hatred of men is very commonplace. As far as the state is concerned, males are pretty much subhuman and they'll do anything they can to destroy men's lives." In his new status as a politician, Buchanan was also given free rein to opine unchallenged about the myth of the glass ceiling, stating, "Women just want to do other things with their lives. They're less driven and have less to gain from getting to the top of their professions, so they naturally don't put in the effort that a man would." Although much of the coverage was critical, the very fact that such quotes appeared in the national press in the context of a political leader running for office helps to provide MRA ideology with a sense of legitimacy and acceptability, whilst also serving as a gateway for potentially susceptible converts who might go on to access some of the movement's more extreme online spaces as a result. The impact can be subtle. One newspaper article, for example, described Buchanan as the author of 3 books, lending him an air of academic credibility, but failed to mention the fact that said books had been self-published, one of them being an anti-feminist tome featuring a picture of a snarling vampire woman with bloodshot eyes on the front cover, which at the time of writing sits at number 602,916 in the Amazon charts. The party's YouTube channel, which it uses to record its members' radio and television appearances, features a large number of videos, including interviews with BBC Radio Kent, BBC Radio Scotland, LBC, Vanessa Feltz, Talk Radio, BBC Three Counties Radio, BBC Radio Nottingham, BBC Radio Leicester, BBC Radio Bristol, BBC Radio Ulster, ITV's This Morning, BBC's Sunday Morning Live, Victoria Derbyshire, Sky News, the BBC's flagship Daily Politics and Sunday Politics programmes, and even Turkish television, among many more. This is an enormous amount of mainstream media exposure and airtime for a party whose 2 parliamentary candidates would garner a grand total of 216 votes between them in the May 2015 general election. A party whose website continues to promote articles such as 13 reasons women lie about being raped and 10 reasons false rape allegations are common. Party whose election manifesto called for scrapping many of the elements of the 2010 Equality Act and suggested that women are as physically aggressive as men, if not more so, in intimate relationships. Large sections of the manifesto were reproduced without criticism in national articles, a prominence certainly not afforded to other similarly sized political outfits. Here we see another part of the problem becoming clear. MRAs capitalise on the media's thirst for controversy. In 2018, as I began to research this book, becoming a near constant lurker on the platforms on which men fantasize about violently raping women, discuss the best ways to trick and force them into sex, bitterly rail against their right to vote or have abortions, I stumbled across a video advertising an up-and-coming MRA conference, Messages for Men 2018. The video caught my eye, primarily because it featured images of me. It seemed to the organisers that the best way to advertise this conference about conveying positive messages for men was to use video images of high-profile feminists, most of them crudely photoshopped to include devilish red eyes or horns. Naturally, it seemed only fair to attend, given the lengths to which they had gone to make me feel included, so I purchased a ticket online. The event sounded right up Alex's street, so I booked my ticket in his name, in case mine rang any alarm bells, and immediately received several messages about the top-secret location for the conference, which could only be revealed after midnight the day before the event, due to concerns about the potential disruption that might otherwise be caused by angry feminist protesters. On the morning of the event, the long-awaited email with the details of the secret conference venue arrived. I anticipated a university venue or perhaps a generic conference space or meeting hall, but the address, which I checked twice, was for an O'Neill's pub in Chinatown, London. The email delicately described it as an entertainment venue. Quick Google of the pub website revealed that they don't particularly host events, but helpfully offer to reserve a space in the pub for people wanting to arrange drinks after work. This gave some idea about the real scale of an event that had rather grandiosely been referred to online as a major conference hosting academics, activists, and authors, with MRAs encouraged to snap up tickets before the event sold out. Nevertheless, I set off for Chinatown. As I approached the venue, I saw a long line of people queuing eagerly ahead. An impressive turnout. But when I got a little closer, I realized they were waiting to get into a popular Chinese dessert shop selling buns and pastries. Just beyond the queue, the entrance to O'Neill's was quiet, and the pub inside was trading as usual. I approached several confused staff members, most of whom seemed to have no idea that any event was taking place, before one disappeared to try and find out whether conference was being held. Eventually he reappeared and directed me up two slightly sticky flights of stairs to a rather grim, low-ceilinged room with dark grey painted walls, in which some chairs had been set out facing a makeshift stage. In one corner, a Christmas tree, decorated with cheap red and silver baubles, drooped slightly to one side. As I joined the dozen or so men waiting to be admitted, my heart started to beat faster. I couldn't help wondering what overlap there might be between present company and those who had sent me graphic emails about eradicating me from the world like a dripping poison, or waiting outside my house to rape me till I begged for mercy. I slipped quietly into a seat at the back of the room, sure that at any moment an angry hand would clamp down on my shoulder, or a shout of recognition would ring out. Keeping my head down and allowing my hair to swing forward, partially shielding my face, seemed to work. After waiting a few moments for my heart rate to stabilize, I raised my eyes to take in my surroundings. A bar stretched most of the length of the room, and many of the assembled men were ordering drinks and greeting acquaintances. There were perhaps 60 men milling around. I counted a handful of women, most younger than the men, and maybe 7 men of colour. There were no women of colour present. The biggest single demographic seemed to be white men in their late 50s or 60s, but there were also a number of younger men who looked to be in their late 20s or 30s. One had brought with him a child of about 10. Most of the men were well dressed, with several in smart suits and ties. I saw a man wearing a black t-shirt emblazoned with "Male Lives Matter." Another wore the slogan, "This is what a gender equality activist looks like." The apocryphal Y-front-wearing spotty teenagers squinting at computer screens in their mother's basement were not in evidence among this group of respectable-looking attendees. They were men who would pass on the street without thinking twice. Like the other inhabitants of the manosphere, they are men. We all pass on the street. One sat down next to me and introduced himself amicably. We chatted about the area of London he'd travelled from, how it's quiet at weekends, which allows him to decompress after a busy week. He asked me politely about my own neighbourhood, and I sidestepped a couple of questions about what brought me here today, vaguely mentioning a desire to learn more about the movement. Technically true. He told me he'd attended previous events, including one in Birmingham, and found it convenient that most gatherings of this sort in the UK seem to take place in London. We exchanged a few further pleasantries before lapsing into silence. Later, he would give a speech about launching legal action against former CPS chief Alison Saunders for the crime of championing victims of sexual violence during her time in the role. A young woman took to the stage. There followed an incongruous diversion to classical mythology as she drew our attention to the conference leaflets, which featured a muscular man clad only in a loincloth, working at a fire with metal tools, surrounded by other crouching male figures. The homoerotic nature of the imagery was apparently not intentional. She explained that the image was supposed to represent Prometheus's sacrifice in defying the gods to bring fire to man. Fire, she explained, represents so many important masculine qualities. A comment about Pandora bringing all man's problems was met with appreciative sniggers. The seemingly obligatory requirement of a vague classical reference to add a sense of authenticity was duly satisfied. We were then taken on a whistle-stop tour of the year's major events, as perceived by an MRA. The Kavanaugh hearings, after which Brett Kavanaugh was confirmed as a Supreme Court justice in spite of claims he had committed sexual assault, were cast as the downfall of the Me Too movement, much to the appreciation of the crowd. But the biggest cheer by far was reserved for the announcement that both Donald Trump and his wife Melania had made statements in support of men and justice following Kavanaugh's confirmation. This struck me as the most significant moment I witnessed. Men all around me were cheering and clapping approvingly, nodding encouragingly at one another. It was the first tangible proof I had seen that the words and actions of Trump have had a direct evangelizing impact on the movements I was investigating. His statements are seized upon and held up as direct approval and encouragement for the manosphere and its ideology. The conference was small, and its attendees' arguments weak, but emerging from the pub into the bustling central London street reminded me just how real these communities are, in a way far more tangible than the easily closed tabs of the online forum hatred littering my laptop screen might suggest.